Some cities in the U.S. have thrived off suburban and economic growth through the last few decades, gaining new residents and opportunities to become a better place. But it's also gone in the opposite direction. Some major metros have seen economic declines in their largest industries, which has resulted in soaring poverty and crime rates. So today I wanted to go over these cities, specifically the 8 cities with the highest crime rate, going over their overall future outlook, their worst neighborhoods, and just the situation they're in. Before that though, I wanted to quickly ask if you would please consider subscribing to the channel. We make content like this every week, and subscribing helps me out a ton. So if you would please just consider clicking the button below, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. So when looking at what is the overall most dangerous city in the country, I think there's a lot of statistics that could be looked at. Most crime statistics should be factored in, as well as things like weather or road quality. But that's obviously not something I have access to, so we're just going to have to go by violent crime rate. An easy number that tells us crimes that cause physical harm to an individual, murders, assaults, and anything like that. We'll go by the rate of crimes per 100,000 residents in 2022. So before we get into our top 8, let's give our honorable mentions in the 10 and 9 spot. So 10 is St. Louis, which I'm sure you'd expect to see much higher. It's a dangerous city for sure, and a lot of lists actually have it at number 1. But simply going by violent crime statistics, it doesn't sweep the floor, with a rate of 1,472. Ninth place is in the same state, being Kansas City. This city hasn't seen the same level of national attention as St. Louis related to crime, and the overall city seems to be in a better place, despite the higher violent crime rate, which is up at 1,481. Now let's get into our real list, with our 8th place city, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So Milwaukee is a city that has struggled for quite some time now, with famous murderers like Jeffrey Dahmer residing here. It's lost population in every census since 1950, and the overall crime pretty much clearly follows the city limits, and it shows the place that the city proper is in. Like most of these cities, the overall metro is in a much better place, with significant suburban growth and lots of very nice areas around the region, but the city isn't keeping up. The most dangerous neighborhoods would be Metcalf Park, North Division, and Franklin Heights, all located northwest of the downtown. And the overall violent crime rate is 1,508. Next up in 7th place, we have Oakland, California. Located in the Bay Area, the city is growing more than most cities on this list, actually jumping by 12.8% between 2010 and 2020. Looking at the entire Bay Area though, you can definitely tell that Oakland is in a very dense spot for crime, especially in the downtown area. Although the most dangerous neighborhoods are located at the south end of the city limits, with Eastmont, Webster, and Fitchburg all having over double the crime of the city average. The overall rate is 1,521, putting it high up on the list. Next up in 6th place, we have Baltimore, Maryland, one that you would definitely expect to see on this list. Baltimore has been known as one of America's worst cities for quite some time now, and it feels like it's trying its hardest to gain that title between all of the things going on there. Everything within the central area is known to be the worst part, with row homes and abandoned lots everywhere. But the most dangerous neighborhoods are Pulaski, Fairfield area, and Hopkins Middle East, which are scattered around the edge of the city, the harbor, and obviously the Middle East. The overall violent crime rate is 1,553, putting it 30 points ahead of Oakland. Moving into our 5th place spot, we have one that I did not expect at all, which is Tacoma, Washington. Now, I'm sure none of you had this on your predicted list, but the stats don't lie, so I have to include it. The city is in a strong place for economic growth, with a massive port and healthcare industry leading the way. Tacoma has gained population at every census, moving up to over 220,000 residents. The Hilltop neighborhood historically struggled with crime during the 80s and 90s, but present day the worst neighborhoods are Central, South End, and South Tacoma, which is basically just all the urbanized central city areas. There's also a large homelessness and affordability problem, which could have helped lead to the crime rate of 1,609. Next in 4th place, we have Cleveland, Ohio, which brings us back to a city you'd expect to see on a list like this. Cleveland is a major Midwestern and Great Lakes city, with teams in every major sport and an extremely important history. But it's also a perfect example of a declining Rust Belt city, losing population in 1960 as well as every census after that. The most dangerous neighborhoods are the Industrial Valley, the economic area along the Cuyahoga River, as well as North Broadway and Kinsman in the southeast. Things don't seem to be going uphill for Cleveland, and the violent crime rate is 1,613. Moving into the top 3, we have Little Rock, Arkansas, where we see a large jump in the crime rates. So Little Rock is the capital of Arkansas, a state that is overall greatly struggling, with not many nice areas outside the northwest corner. Little Rock is located in the center of the state, entirely south of the Arkansas River. The population is just over 200,000, which has increased at every census, most notably 22% and 20% in the 70s and 80s. The city seems to be a perfect example of a struggling southern city, with high poverty, low life expectancy, and a lot of major problems. This has led to a very high violent crime rate, which, as I said, ranks 3rd in the country. The most dangerous neighborhoods are South End, Oak Forest, and Stevens, which make up the south and west parts of the inner city. All 3 of these neighborhoods have double the crime rate of the city average, which is 1,833, a large jump from the rest of our list. Looking for another large jump, we have our second place city, Detroit, Michigan. So Detroit has numerous obvious problems. Throughout the city's history, it has seen great decline from a once great city and economic superpower. Detroit saw its biggest decline in the late 1900s, with some very bad years between the 80s and 2000s. Now, they've sort of gotten themselves back on their feet and seen improvements from where they were, but things are still not great. The city's area is too big for its own good, making it harder for law enforcement to upkeep the entire area, which has also hurt the crime rate. The worst neighborhoods are Fishcorn, Carbon Works, and Van Steuben, which are scattered around the outer parts of the city. The overall violent crime rate is 2,027. Now, finally, in our first place spot, we have Memphis, Tennessee. Now, Memphis is an iconically dangerous city. Much like Little Rock, it's a declining southern city that has a high poverty rate and has dealt with many major issues in its past. The population is fairly stagnant, with the peak being in 2000, not in the 50s or 60s like a lot of Rust Belt cities. Between 2010 and 2020, though, it lost 2.1%. Interestingly, Memphis is the first city on our list that the most dangerous neighborhood is in their downtown. Second place would be Parkway Village, near the airport in the southeast, and third would be Fraser, north of the downtown. These all have crime rates a lot closer to the city's average, which shows that every neighborhood is pretty similar. Finally, the overall crime rate is 2,420, which is significantly above any other city in the country. So that's today's list. Every American city has its own story, and there are so many different reasons for why a crime rate can get so high. So that really goes into the history of the U.S. Every city is interesting, and every city is unique. I encourage all of you to look into individual cities to see what's going on. Thanks for watching. Thank you to the members this week: Makita Martinoff, Kurt Ainsley, Yoshi Foods, Jerome McCall, Haystack, KMS162, JL, Sir JC17, Bryson, Dominic Psyche, Rosebud 4, Jeremy Jarvis, Christopher DeAngelis, Darkbird, Big Pasty, Jeremy Crone, Wolfling73, Snyderschwein, Florida Jake, Benjamin Whitings, Ryan Devins, and Hazev the Wolf. I appreciate you all so much. You do so much for the channel. If you want to become a member, the link is down in the description below. All the money goes straight into my savings. So if you appreciate the content and you want to help me out as a person, that's the best way to do it. You know, it's all going to a good cause. I'm coming into college soon, so if you want to help me out, that's the best way to do it. Thank you.